All right, we're live. Hold on. Speak for a second.
Testing one, two, testing one, two.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to well, my channel. I don't have a typical but thing. Um, I'm here with the Wildcast today to discuss what we'll be dealing with a lot of sets of topics which had gone over. Like recently, we did D&D with Grim Jim. Today we're talking about D&D again, but this time with well, do please introduce yourself to the people.
Sure thing. My name is Riley Myers, also known as Rexel, and I am the host of the Wildcast. Our channel you can find on YouTube, and I think that's about it. We used to stream on Twitch, but we are done with that. It's just not worth it.
If you guys are interested, go down into the description of this video, and please, if you want to, look up their channel. They are down there, so feel free to look them up. Okay. Now, Rexel. I'm gonna call you Rex. I've called you Rex for a long time. Actually,
That's fine.
yeah, me and Rex has been talking for a long time. Well, for a little bit of a long time, but I'm not gonna get into everything. I, I mean, um, what was I going to start with? So, what do you think? This is gonna be a really weird place to like sit around, but what do you think about fifth edition? Like genuinely.
So, 5th edition on its own is probably the best edition of Dungeons and Dragons to ever come out of Wizards of the Coast. And I
Mm.
say that with a bit of a biased perspective because I didn't start with 5e, I started with Pathfinder. And Pathfinder on its surface was really
Ah.
complicated for somebody even as analytical as myself to essentially grasp onto this entire new concept of just imagining the world and the rules, and it was difficult for me to get into and understand. And my first campaign was an awful one, but it's still my own fault. Uh, when it comes to fifth edition, it was an edition that a different YouTuber, who I don't really subscribe to anymore, was playing with a bunch of his students, and I eventually, knowing my father liked Dungeons and Dragons, and knowing that it was actually incredibly easy to get into after watching somebody else play this and being like, oh yeah, I could probably do that. I didn't really want to be the dungeon master, but 5th edition is one of those systems that even brand new to the entire system, I was able to pick it up and go. Um, it's incredibly like clear and consistent, or at least it was. You could very easily like switch out certain rules that you don't like for your own, such as like uh drinking a potion for yourself as a bonus action on your turn as opposed to an action, or even just changing the critical hit system, which is exactly what I do for my campaign.
Mm.
Instead of the double dice that 5th edition uses, we use the Pathfinder edition, where you max out your damage and then roll the dice and add it. Which
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
different systems do it different ways, but like I said, it's one of those systems that's really easy to change the rules out to fit your your player's needs and your DMing style. Um, on its face value, I mean, it just genuinely was the best system out there at the time.
I, I mean, I'm gonna share something with everybody that is here. I have been playing D&D for less than a year. I think that's an accurate statement because okay, so I've been DMing. First of all, I didn't start by DMing. I started as a player, but I played like one session and then nothing happened off of that. Don't blame the person that basically played it. It's just that they never picked up and wanted to do something else. I have played first edition. Believe it or not, as
I'm
shocking
sorry.
as it sounds. Yeah, I hate myself. Like after I played first edition, I was done. Okay, I'm never touching that shit again. But
It's
anyway,
not that even like first edition for its time, it was good, but it's awful.
yeah, I know it's horrid. And I played this with like a group of like friends. Well, not a group of friends, new people that I met. I met actually somebody that became a really close friend that I'm going to run my one shots with from now on. I'm actually making like one shots for like a private set of groups that I meet online randomly, and then I'm just like running through those people and seeing if they are interested in playing like a one shot, you know. And I'm testing monsters of those on those people, and I haven't been able to do it yet because of the reason that I've been super busy with everything that has been going on with my injury. Not to say too much for you guys in the channel, but it's not too much. Anyway,
Right.
I
Sometimes as well, when it comes down to being a dungeon master, sometimes you just have to answer the call. I
yeah,
never intended to be the dungeon master, but I really wanted to play, so I said, "Fuck it, I have to be the dungeon master if I'm gonna play."
I really loved. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I absolutely loved my first dungeon mastering, but it I was playing. Okay, so I was playing two of the same campaign, which anybody that is out there, don't get me wrong, it's not necessarily a negative thing to run two of the same campaign, but by two different groups. No, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that you gotta be prepared for dealing with a lot of mental issues if you start picking up that task, which
I
is
wouldn't
some.
even say it's mental issues, it's more like you have to be careful not to metagame if it's the 2 of the same game. Unless you're talking about the same world, then yeah, planning and trying to make sure that the parties stay separate is definitely an issue.
Well, more of the problem that I was having is that I'm not built yet for dealing with two campaigns at once. So I had to
Gotcha.
shut down my first game. Uh, Long story short, yeah, it's not nice. But essentially, I wanted to keep the spring one going, but I didn't want the other one to go. So I was like discussing this with my friends and stuff like that. But it's not neither here nor there, and it's not important to today's conversation. I do. But yeah, D&D has been life changing for me and has helped me tell a story which I not otherwise wouldn't have been able to tell. Which, to be fair, has been life changing for me.
Right. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I feel like a lot of people kind of feel that way, not just about Dungeons& and Dragons, but about many different tabletop RPGs. The community itself is and just an amazing group of people that
Mm-hmm.
have shown time and time and again that when it comes down to what's right and what's wrong, we've been able to band together. It's just this is the most recent example of it, when it comes to the OGL
Yeah,
crisis effectively that happened.
I'm gonna bring that up in a second. Okay, so the entire thing with the OGL. Okay, everybody that hasn't watched Rex's video on the entire thing, that's actually how I found Rex on the internet. Long story short, it's a long story. But I was like looking for people to like collaborate with, so I went on a binge for YouTube channels, which literally said that I'm done with one D&D. Sorry, I'm done with D&D
I mean,
because
I'm done with 1D&D as well. That was part of the rant too.
that was part of the rant. I sat through the entire thing. I enjoyed it way too much. Judge me not. I don't care. But essentially, I felt you when I first listened to it. So it was really like because not only was I terrified that everything that I had created was gonna come crumbling down.
Mhm, and that
That
was the
was
fear for a lot of people.
yeah, and I worked months tirelessly, years. Hell, I worked 2 years on this fucking D&D thing. Most of it started off in my mind. Now it's actually most of it is much of it is down paper. But
Mm.
the sincere problem that I had is that they fucked with us, and I did not appreciate that. That was
Well, it's worse than that, it's that they betrayed our trust. We literally have been using this as a way to just get together as a community in smaller groups to explore lives outside of our own, tell a story together that we all love to share. These memories that we have, even though they didn't really happen, really did happen, and we all got to witness them. It essentially felt like it wasn't our story to tell, according to Watsy, when it came down to certain parts of it. And
they felt like it was
it really felt like they
unbiased.
were trying to essentially take their domain and everything associated with it and be like, okay, well, it's ours now. And you can't create with it, you can't create anything about it unless you keep giving us your stuff. And even then, they tried to backtrack a little bit and be like, no, 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 we don't want your stuff, just the stuff you're going to create from now on. And then they had to backtrack even further, being like, no, 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 it wasn't a contract, it was a draft. No, it absolutely was a contract.
Yeah, I
And
know.
it's they still haven't admitted that. And it's the fact that instead of admitting their fuck up, they decided to instead hide behind their narrative and play dumb effectively, which is just fucking stupid. But it was very terrifying to hear a lot of it because my channel alone isn't very one popular, and two, it's not even like it's not been up for very long. But I've been doing this like my as of the 22nd, my server hit a 4-year anniversary as of March 22nd. We've been doing this for 4 years, and we don't want to stop. We want our story to be ours, but we want to be able to share it. We want to be able to tell people what we've accomplished through our games. And it just felt like we were essentially, I don't know, walked all over by the company that brought us all together in the first place.
I agree. I don't really have too much to say about one D&D other than the fact that I I was I was really happy until, like, don't get me wrong, until the moment where the OGL was when the OGL stuff was released. Apparently, okay, when the OGL stuff was released, um I didn't know what to do. Uh I'm not gonna say too much about it because I was kind of panicking, and I was just go praying to whatever god, whether it's the Nair or or God. I was praying to some form of relief for this shit. Apparently, the community stood up, woke up, if you will. I don't think we ever were asleep, but you get my point.
Well,
We
we had some very fortunate people on our side with insider information who were willing to risk their jobs to tell the community that
Yeah,
we were about to
yeah,
suffer a major loss when it came to our IPs.
yeah. Most of the people in WotC, the majority, I think, don't quote me on it because I don't know
I will.
100%. I don't know 100%, but I think that the majority in WotC disagreed with what they were trying to do. Uh,
Oh yeah, no, it was never a fault of the development team or the writing team of any of the books. No, it was never their intention when it came to the OGL, and when it came to them writing the book, chances are for a lot of the books that are mainstream Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, they're given a contract separate from the OGL that doesn't even necessarily get placed under the OGL itself, which is why certain monsters, like for example, we have now as of today, we have the SRD within CC4, which is Creative Commons 4, and that only has content from explicitly the create from the standard reference document. The issue there is Artificer is not included. So we still don't have Artificer in part of like public domain or the ability to create subclasses publicly for them technically, even though we all let it happen. It's just what's in those books is written under and paid for by WotC under separate contracts just outside of the OGL and or whatever OGL they're working with at the time. And so when it comes down to the content of a book, uh, you have to be careful with what you make because if it isn't protected content, then that can rise to a couple of other problems. It's just it's stupid. It's just stupid. Um, I still feel like D&D isn't as open as we want it to be, but it's definitely a hell of a lot better than it was. Um, but there's more to say on that later.
yeah, I don't necessarily have anything to share left to share about all of that. I do want to ask you the question. Well, not about anything with one D&D or anything. I honestly,
I could I could talk for hours about how much they've already fucked up one D&D. Uh,
I don't like.
Druids are shit now.
Don't get me wrong. I would love to have this discussion with you one day on another
Uh-huh.
I.G.A.S that is all
Sure.
dedicated to one D&D. Sure, that day will arrive. I promise you. When
Sure.
one D&D releases, you and me, we should do a shit. We should just do like
I'll
a
revisit it and I'll tear it apart piece by piece. How's
yeah.
that sound?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to like shit post so hard on one D&D when it comes out. Like, even though my voice is so small, I'm going to shit post all over that fucking shit. Anyway, now, okay, okay. So you answered my question of what your favorite edition is. Or the fifth edition is your favorite. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm. It
Uh,
won't be, but it is for now.
hmm. I do wonder, what do you think is a worst subclass?
The worst subclass, it depends because I could give you probably my idea of the worst subclass per class, but comparing class by class gets kind of complicated because each class brings something different to the table, except Ranger. Um,
Hmm.
and I feel like if you're trying to compare like, oh, the worst wizard subclass is probably conjuration because they nerfed conjuration into the ground when it came to 5th edition, and compare that to the, oh, I don't know, the worst sorcerer subclass, storm sorcery. Like, they are two different classes, even though it's full casting. They bring completely different values to the table, and it's hard to actually like genuinely compare them both. Because if you want a damage dealing build, storm sorcery is probably the more likely way to go. But if you're wanting conjuration, then you go with the conjuration wizard. It just doesn't. You can't really compare them too much. Um,
Personally, my favorites are my least favorite. Like, okay, I'll be honest with everybody that is watching this. My least favorite subclass may be, and hear me out here, the Beastmaster Ranger.
that's not a controversial. That's not a controversial take at all. It's the worst subclass for ranger, but ranger is also the worst class.
I
That's
think.
just low hanging fruit.
Okay, fine, fine. I I mean, to be fair, Ranger is not my least favorite class. Not by a long shot. I heavily dislike the sorcerer. But that's mostly because I don't understand the sorcerer. But that's, take that as you will. Not only that, but it's the least played. Like, okay, I have six to eight. I played with 12 to 14 players. All right, none of them have gone sorcerer. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's
It means nothing at
bad.
all.
That means nothing at all. It is just that like they made three of them made four of them. Sorry, went ranger.
I
So
will I will say this. I will say this. Something I have noticed when it came to comparing new players to veteran players, Ranger for new players is a very common pick. And it's a very common pick because it seems like it has a lot to offer pretty early on in the game, or even with the level you're going with. Later on in the game is when the class tends to kind of teeter off and be worse. And then as people start playing Rangers, they realize why we don't play Ranger. Everybody else will pick a class like, oh, I don't want to go barbarian. That's too easy. Let's pick a fighter. So I'm not tanking all the damage, but I'm dealing some damage and tanking some hits. Or somebody will go, oh, hey, I want to play a sorcerer because I want to be able to cast a bunch of different spells at the same time, but I also don't want to be hit because they like having those kind of drawbacks, like building into that character. And that's not talking about the power gamers. That's a whole industry of
oh yeah, for sure,
people I
for
hate playing
sure.
with, anyways.
I fully understand that. I respect that. It's yeah. I I mean personally, I okay. So my okay, this is probably controversial. My favorite subclass of all time is the Gloomstalker. Like,
It's a terrible class.
I know, but I like I just
It was
like.
a fantastic idea. I 100% agree. I've played a
Uh,
Gloomstalker Ranger before. The
I
issue, though, is that some of those features are literally like so explicit to Underdark. Not even just like in the dark. You have to be in the Underdark for most of them to even be remotely functional. Creatures that rely on dark vision to see would be like dark elves and things like that. But creatures that aren't relying on dark vision to see you can still see you, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Great concept, poor execution. you get one additional attack per combat on the very first round. That's it.
Mm.
It's 3 attacks on the first round, and then the same 2 attacks with no additional bonuses throughout.
No, I
It's a
understand.
terrible feature.
I understand. I mean, I have a second favorite, which is the Eldritch Knight, which is even like I know many people hate it, and I know many people love it. I
Oh
love
no,
it.
I really do like Eldritch Knight. My only complaint with it is that it's as restrictive as it is. Which, if we do get into talking about the system I'm working on, I did fix that so that
Well,
it's effectively the same subclass, but it's not nearly as restrictive as it was beforehand.
I think. Well, I do think that Arcane Archer, like Arcane Archer, is a neat concept. I just think it was executed
It's
poorly.
garbage.
Like the only problem that it has is that it has a limited set of arrows and you can only fire them 2 times. Now, the
Yep.
way that I have it set up for now, if somebody wants to go Arcane Archer, is very simple. I basically have it set up this way so that for each level you get one arcane shot with that level. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Every level you get a subclass feature. You mean?
No, no, no. Every level you get one more art. You could fire an extra one. So essentially, at 7 level you could fire 7 shots. At 8 level you could fire 8 shots.
That's
I know it seems a bit broken at the moment. Nobody is currently going their class in my
yeah.
thing.
There's probably a reason because they know it's bad. I will say this though. There are a number of different iterations that I personally allow in my game. I forget who made it, but you can probably find it on GM Binder, and it's called the Arcane Marksman, which is the damage is reduced on all of the different features that are there, but it increases when you hit certain levels. And you also get levels at each of the proper features. That's the other thing I don't like about Arcane Archer. You don't get anything on subclass level 11 and 18. You get nothing. It's just an additional choice of an Arcane Archer or an Arcane Shot feature, and no actual feature like every other subclass gets,
Yeah,
except Elementalist or the Way of the 4 Elements. We're not talking about that subclass,
I don't necessarily hate the 4 elements class, but I'm not gonna get into the monk. The monk
right?
is its own shit post on its own. Okay,
Monks are OP.
yeah, we're
I
not
don't
gonna.
care. People say monks are broken. No, monks are OP. You
No,
can fight
I,
me.
I agree. I have a shadow monk in my game now, and he is awesome. And I gave him too much power, and I'm so happy that I did because he's such an introvert and he never uses that power. So he's kind of like a one punch man kind of guy that hits hard, which is the kind of idea. But he's like he never uses that power, and that's the beauty
Aha.
of him. Yeah, yeah, he's
That
awesome.
sounds like an accident waiting to happen.
That is an accident waiting to happen. Uh, but I love him so much. I mean he doesn't got the ability to one shot anything. He's just really powerful, which by himself. Well, essentially, since he started so late in the game, I gave him magic items, and he wanted a tattoo. The magic tattoos, which is kind of fun on their own.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I I like so many classes. I hate so many classes. My yeah, I my sub my like I have so many. There's so many good subclasses. Like one of my favorite subclasses of all time is knowledge domain. Like
That's a good one. It was an interesting concept. It was something that people didn't really expect to be available for cleric of all classes in the first place, but it showed just how versatile the class of cleric could actually be. And I
yeah.
wish they would have done that with other classes,
Now my second
but they
favorite
didn't.
is my second favorite is probably Tempest domain because I do like Tempest domain. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's perfect, but I do think it's interesting. Nevertheless, I like the idea of it. If that makes sense.
I
I
have to reread Tempest Domain if I'm going to criticize it, because it's
uh,
been a while, and I only have a Twilight cleric.
oh, fair enough. I mean, I like war clerics, but they are the shittest ones in my. Like they are the most
They
boring.
really aren't. There are
I,
worse clerics.
no, I know there are worse clerics. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that are worse, but
It's too easy for war clerics, especially when you can multi-class, because one thing that a lot of full casting classes have issues with is not using their bonus action because they just genuinely don't have a bonus action to use. And while that's not ever an issue with clerics when they have things like spiritual weapon or sanctuary, um, it's still like an option that you instead of attacking once, you can
Or
attack
healing word.
twice. Yeah, or healing word, exactly.
Yeah.
It just as far as the war cleric goes, it's an interesting feature, but it follows a similar issue that another like a similar issue that warlocks have, where because they get those features at first level, those features are effectively available to any class at the cost of one level. So if you're wanting to play a ultra powerful sorcerer, barbarian, warlock combo, you can, and all you need is your charisma modifier. It's pretty ridiculous.
All right. You're right. I do gotta ask you, what is your favorite race slash species?
Tabaxi.
You like the Tabaxi?
Tabaxi is best race, and you can't fucking. You're
No,
not gonna win any conversation
no,
you
no,
have
no,
on the
no, no.
challenge.
I don't care what you're saying. My favorite class is dwarf. Sorry, my favorite
That's a.
race. Sorry, race is dwarf. My favorite race is dwarf, but my favorite D&D race is Leonin. Like because I
I
just
don't
like.
like the Leonin.
No,
I
I understand. I just love them. I think they're so adoring. 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 Uh,
adorable. There you go.
no,
But
no,
you also have to
adoring.
understand, like,
Yeah.
so the reason Tabaxi is best race is because of the what is it, 3,000 mile an hour per. Sorry, no, not even 3,000 miles an hour. It'd be like 3,000 feet in a turn or some shit like that
Yeah, I've heard
that you can
about that.
do.
Hmm.
It's super fucking easy because whatever bonus you add to your Tabaxi, whatever your Tabaxi is, or if somebody else is adding bonuses to your Tabaxi, all you have to do is spend nothing on your turn and double it for a turn. It's insane how good that feature can be.
Yeah, I know.
Like you need to get from point A to point B, and there are 3 people going before you. Great, long strider, haste, and then oh, what's the other one? Um,
I love the Tabaxi. Honestly, it's just not my favorite. I understand why people say it's their favorite. It's just not my favorite. I
I
mean,
can yeah, I mean I get why it wouldn't be a lot of people's favorite, but at the same time, like that one feature alone is why the race is literally the best race in the game.
I know. I mean, I'm not going by stats. I'm just going by preference. To be fair,
I mean,
myself.
fair. Preference. If you want to know what the most broken race in the game is, it's elf. Elves are fucking stupid.
Okay, can I just say something that is stupid? Okay, so the elves live the longest, right?
Yeah, they also don't need to sleep and can't be put to sleep by magical means,
Precisely. So I'm
so
gonna
they're
ask you a
immune to
question.
like
Why do
half
they
the
have
bard spell
so much
list.
diversity? They should
What's
not
that?
have as much diversity as they have.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I the diversity isn't really what gets me because elves are elves are elves. It doesn't fucking matter. The only thing anybody ever picks an elf for is elven trance. That's it. And
What? Oh yeah,
trance.
trans. Oh yeah. Sorry, I think you said trans, like transgender. Sorry, my bad. Sorry, I was confused for a second. I'm so sorry.
Not everything in my life is like half gay. Okay.
Hey, if there's any consolation, I'm half gay, so I'm not. Don't judge. I'm not judging.
The joke was I'm trans. If people who didn't know that, I'm a trans woman.
Yeah. Um.
But yeah, no, it literally the fact that they are immune to almost literally half the Bard spell list, and then the fact that they also have advantage on what is it? Advantage on certain saving throws as well. I think it's oh yeah, advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and then they can't be put to sleep with magical means.
I like the UNT. Personally,
I feel like they didn't do enough with it. It's a race. It's not.
I mean, it's a
It's a
race.
race that's so overshadowed by everything else.
Yeah, it's a race that I renamed and everything for my D&D game because of the reason that it would be cooler if I renamed it, and not only that, because this was on the period when the OGL was being made, so I wanted nothing to do with like the original D&D. So I was gonna change all of the races name, which
Yeah, I'm in the process of working on that too. Like, I'm not gonna call the cat folk in my game Tabaxi, and I'm also changing it so unarmed strike can use Dex because it makes fucking sense.
that make I don't understand why that doesn't make. Yeah, I understand that because not only can a dexterous fighter beat a fucking. There's a reason why the fucking monk can choose between strength and dex. Okay. Fucking
Mhm.
hell. Anyway,
It was just a weird feature to have because, oh yeah, Tabaxi claws. You get first off, you get +2 to Dex, +1 to Charisma, and then your claws are 1d4 plus Strength. What the fuck?
yeah, it's fucking dumb. All right. No, I'm not even gonna step on the worst class in D&D because I know what you're going to say. You don't need to say it. I know what you're going to say.
Ranger.
Everybody. Okay, yeah.
I What pisses me off is how WotC specifically has refused to change the class in a manner that would make it usable through all 20 levels, and instead have allocated to instead buff the subclasses they create, which gives them more beneficial features earlier than a capstone. So now multi-classing of the ranger is very powerful, and then you add other features from other classes. It's the wrong way to fix a problem.
I
It's like it's the first solution they made that they came up with, and it's clearly just the worst solution they could have come up with.
yeah.
And it's made certain subclasses. I mean, that's just not even for ranger. For any subclass, they've increased the amount of power each subclass can have. Twilight cleric with 300 feet dark vision and the ability to grant that to any other creature is just insane. When you talk about having like the what is it called? The fucking what is it called? Matt Mercer's bullshit when it comes to the wizards. The the chronergy subclass, which on its face value seems like a really cool idea until you realize how fucking broken it is. With the goddamn Echo Knight. I love Matt Mercer. He's a great DM. He's shit at balancing.
Yeah,
And
just
I
look at
stand
the
by that. Like
just look at the blood hunter. Just look at the blood hunter.
Bloodhunter was actually really underpowered when it first came out. Both as the witch and as the Bloodhunter. I don't necessarily like the formatting of the Bloodhunter as it is now because it uses a mechanic now that I had been planning on using for my own system for some time, and that's the ability to choose what modifier you use for your Hemocraft die. Instead, in mine, it's for spell casting, and you get to choose the modifier you use for that. For Bloodhunter, by the way, when you use it, you either pick Intelligence or Wisdom, and that's the modifier you use for your Hemocraft and your spellcasting ability modifier when it comes to the third casting Warlock list.
Fair enough. Okay,
But
so this
literally, Echo Knight's just broken as fuck.
no, I know Echo Knight. I mean, I think Samurai is really fun, but I'm not gonna get into it. I'm not gonna get into it. I'm not gonna get into it because I'm never
I'll
gonna
say
get.
this: for some campaigns, having a higher power scale makes a lot of sense, especially when everybody in your campaign is pretty high on that power scale, or even remotely is just like the campaign itself has those as subclasses that are for the campaign specifically. And I want to bring up Crown of the Oathbreaker for this. I was the one that was editing Crown of the Oathbreaker subclasses and putting them up onto D&D Beyond, both on my personal account and on a different account they gave me when D&D Beyond was like, you can't do this, and I was like, yes, I fucking can. I can show you the 3 people that fucking made the book. But that was the whole issue that ended up getting resolved. I have been very critical about the subclasses, and I stand by each of my criticisms. The subclasses themselves are not great subclasses. I don't like any of them at all. I think the druid subclasses are probably the most balanced out of all of them, and even then, they're kind of copy paste after one after the other of each other for different like creature types. Um, I can't speak to how those subclasses though are going to do in the actual campaign because I've not read the campaign books. I've not looked into the source material. I've only touched on subclasses. If somebody were to take any of those subclasses in Crown of the Oathbreaker's first book and try to say that they wanted to use it in my campaign, I would just flat out say no. Because they're incredibly powerful. They're worded weirdly and they don't always give out the clearest of intentions for how the feature is supposed to work. Even after I've gone through and tried to adjust all of them, some of my adjustments were denied, and it just doesn't make any sense. But on that same notion, each of the subclasses was created by somebody else. They aren't my subclasses. None of those are mine, and they aren't really my place to tell somebody how to write them. Like, they want to write them their way for their book. That's perfectly fine, and it's absolutely amazing. It's part of why I still want, after reading all the subclasses being poorly, like, just disappointed in the entire thing, I still wanted to make sure they had my money because it was still a project that was somebody's passion project, and they wanted it to keep going. It's homebrew content. It's new. It's something people haven't seen before. I just personally will never allow any of their stuff in my games. But again, if someone were to run Crown of the Oathbreaker, chances are those subclasses are perfect for the system. So some subclasses, what I'm trying to say here, it makes sense to have them specifically for your system or for your world. Like the Echo Knight in Matt Mercer's world makes a lot of fucking sense given the lore that's happening. And the power scale of a lot of Matt Mercer stuff makes sense because he throws a lot of really big, heavy shit at them, and it's 7 players fighting it, usually. But
Uh,
at the same time, for an average D&D game, when you're trying to build for maybe 4 players, and somebody takes an Echo Knight, that becomes a big fucking problem for the DM. It doesn't scale well at all, and it leaves the rest of the party kind of underpowered.
well, if there's any consolation, I get that. Like one of the things that I okay, so I've been working on. I finally figured out how to scale my things
Mhm.
in battle wise. So I get it. Like I myself as a DM, I understand how hard it is to run battles, and I get how that because I've heard many DMs genuinely flat out say to me, like straight up to me or like to somebody else, that they have had a miserable time DMing because of the reason that their party is too powerful, which
Yeah.
nothing challenges them. I put a fucking red dragon and they bag of holding that bitch. You know, it's
Sometimes they can get creative, but at the same time, it's a balancing issue.
yeah,
When it comes to the world that I've made, I have a lot of it written down theoretically. Like, I know what's gonna happen at certain points, I know where everybody's gonna be, and that's kind of a personal, like, it's
yeah.
something very easy for me to be like, "Where's somebody?" I can think for a minute and be like, "They're gonna be in this area for this specific reason."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's why the campaign is where it is now. But just, not last session, but the session beforehand, I had one of my players live on TV say, "I thought this was gonna be a harder battle," because everybody had talked up how powerful Haldor was, which is one of, like, the main antagonists of the campaign. And when they finally spoiler alert, when they finally defeated him, it was an accomplishment for everybody else but that one player. And it's a very hard balancing act, because I wasn't intending initially for this to happen, but based on the actions of a completely different player, I had to come up with something different because I couldn't just be like, "Oh yeah, this character is now just captured and gone." It's I figured I'd give them the chance to just defeat them, let it be story, and let it run. Because shit happens, not entirely what I planned, but I'm gonna roll with the punches because I'm not gonna tell my players no they can't do something. Um, but like I said, that one player, like, it's a balancing act, you know? I intended for this individual to be a little more powerful than he was, but I had to make sure I cut back a little bit because instead of it being all of the player characters against him, it was one player character and a bunch of playable NPCs that I have sitting in their campaign that they can pick up and go.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
tough. And sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches. You're not always gonna have the perfect combat, you're not always gonna have the perfect story. All you can do is do your best.
Yeah, that's that's something that any DM could strive for. If there's any DM out there that's actually listening to this and that's just like genuinely suffering through this podcast, no, genuinely try your best. Okay, don't feel okay. So if your players beat you, okay, don't try to kill your party. Try to kill your party, but don't be malicious. Okay.
Here's what I'll say instead. When it comes to combat, I am my player's biggest fan. I want them to succeed, but I want it to be a challenge. So when some things feel too easy, I feel bad because I don't feel like it's enough of a challenge. But when something's too much of a challenge, I feel bad because I'm worried my players might TPK.
Oh, yeah,
Um, it's like I said, it's a complex balancing act, but it's also a part of building the story.
yeah,
As a dungeon master, you're setting the stage, and your players are acting through the scene. You with NPCs and monsters can act through the scene too yourself, but ultimately, like, you don't have to be against your players to make the game fun. And more importantly, more on the player side of things, if a combat is too powerful, if a combat is too dangerous for them, they gotta know when to run like a little bitch. It's part of the game. If they
yeah.
can't do it, they need to run. And
Yeah.
if you as a DM don't want them to run, don't hold them there. Let them run, let them recuperate, figure out a new strategy, and let them fight the monster on their terms.
I personally had a hard time until recently to understand the systems of the game myself. But well, let's move on. I uh I gotta ask you, and I am genuinely curious about this because I want to see what you want to say. And if you say what I think you're going to say, I'm going to be surprised, but I'm not going to be that surprised.
If you
Uh,
think I'm gonna say it, why would you be surprised?
well, okay. What is your favorite spell?
My favorite spell?
Spell in D&D.
I don't know if I have a favorite spell off the top of my head. Um, I can say that the character in my campaign known as Elda Soraya was originally supposed to be a DMPC for my players who were only going to be two in a campaign before they got a third. But I already wrote him into the story, and I was like, fuck it, we'll make him an NPC. The reason I tell you this is to let you know that he has class levels of wizard, which is that of a divination wizard. Divination is probably one of my favorite schools of magic, and I think that if I had to pick a favorite spell, it would more than likely be scrying. Just because scrying is one of those spells that tells you a lot and that gives you a lot of opportunity. But especially when it comes to like like lower level campaigns, it's a lot of fun to have knowledge that you otherwise shouldn't have should they fail the saving throw. It's just a simple answer, but I feel like with a little bit more explaining I needed to just explain it just a little bit more because scrying of all spells is not a very common like spell to have,
Yeah. I
especially not when you've got spellcasters in your monster stat blocks.
I'm gonna be honest with you. My favorite spell. This sounds like a show and tell thing. Now, okay, so recently a friend of mine and me we sat down and we homebrewed the spell together. Uh,
Oh, we were allowed homebrew spells. I've done a lot of those.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was really happy with the way that they really loved the spell.
Well,
and I
good.
and I really love because okay, so the spell is only specific to her because to anybody else it is useless. Because any okay, so if you're a wizard and you look at this spell, you will say this is garbage. But to this person, they will look at this spell and be like, yeah.
So, what is the spell called, and what does it do?
It is called. Well, she wanted to name it. She's also a trans person, by the way. I know. Cool. Now she is called. Well, sorry. The
What
spell
does the
is
spell do?
it's called Ibis's Noxious Fumes. It costs one action. The range itself, it requires a vial of poison concentration up to 1 minute. You conjure a noxious cloud of poisonous gas for 20-foot radius centered within a 20-foot radius centered on yourself. Each creature in the area, including you, must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 3d8 poison damage and is poisoned for the duration of the spell. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't poisoned. At the start of each of its turns, an affected creature must repeat their saving throw, and creature that succeeds on the saving throw is no longer poisoned, but takes 1d8 poison damage on a failed save. The cloud moves with you, centered on you in the space for the duration, Creatures that are immune to poison damage or poison condition poison
Immune to the
condition.
effect.
Yeah, and then higher level, yada yada yada. Give 1d8 extra. Yeah, there you go. Now this is awesome because okay, you might be wondering, this is garbage.
It's a garbage spell in the sense that it's not good for a reproducing kind of thing. It would make sense for somebody who is immune to the poison condition or poison damage as a whole.
well,
That's when the spell would be really good.
let me describe the situation to her. She's a
Right.
UNT.
Mhm.
Which means that she has advantage on magical effects, meaning that on the Constitution saving throw she makes an advantage roll, and for the poison roll she rolls advantage because she is resistant to poison. So she literally gets. So she literally has made a spell that is only useful to her because it will most like it will fuck with her. It will still make her lose health, but
Mhm.
it will still help her. And like it is so good. It is so good. And
I
I
wouldn't say that because the way you're describing it makes it seem like she has double advantage, which isn't a thing in 5e.
no, I'm not saying double. Sorry. I'm saying it's two saving throws, right? She has to make a saving throw after she's poisoned for the
It procs
concentration
2
roll.
saving throws?
No. You have to make a Constitution saving throw. It's a concentration spell, which means she has
Yeah.
to make another Constitution saving throw after the first one.
Gotcha. I see what you're doing. So essentially, she has to make 2 different Constitution saving throws for the spell's effects and has advantage on both different saving throws.
Yes,
There is an issue with that, and that's the fact that it does proc on its own. What level is the spell?
it's just a third level.
A 3rd level spell. That still makes a little bit of sense because genuinely, what you could do is, while it's centered on yourself, you could make because the actual ingredient of the material component is it's a vial of poison, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I would add is that the spell itself has the vial of poison consumed on the casting, and you become immune to poison damage and the poison condition for the duration of the spell. That way, you aren't forcing any Constitution saving throw for the casting of it.
Think about it. I think
It
that's a
makes it
good.
a little more useful for any caster, which is the point of most spells, but it also makes it so that the actual user itself is not suffering the damage itself when most casting classes have either a D6 or D8 hit die.
I know. I'm gonna think about it because not only do I think that I want to improve this spell for other people to use it as
Mhm.
well, eventually. Because not only there's a reason why it's called Abyssis Noxious Fumes. It is her spell. She made it, and
I mean,
I
right. It
with
just it would make a good story arc though for that would be to have the spell itself be something that she consistently improves throughout so that it stops damaging her.
You know what? I hear you there. That's a
There
good
you
thing.
go.
I actually like that. That's brilliant.
If we're doing homebrew spells, though, I do want to change my answer because one of my players actually just recently used a spell that he and I created together, and it's called Starry's Psychic Rend. Starry's Psychic Rend is a 6th level illusion spell that has a concentration of 1 minute, a range of 120 feet. With verbal and somatic components, it's a wisdom save that deals psychic damage, cast in time 1 action. You mentally tear through the mind of a creature, causing immense pain and turmoil. A creature you can see within range must make a wisdom saving throw. That creature takes 8d8 psychic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. Additionally, a creature that failed this save becomes blinded and deafened. A creature that fails the save can repeat the save at the end of each of their turns to end this effect. Alternatively, a creature does not have to be seen to be targeted by this spell if you instead have a connection to that creature through some other means, such as the mind spike spell or such as the mind spike spell. This will, however, break that concentration.
Ooh, I
So
like that.
essentially, it allows you to target them from other means without having without them being a creature you can see, so long as they are known to you through other means and you know exactly where they are. Like a rarest telepathic bond would also be a direct connection, which means that it completely negates the range.
fair enough. I'm gonna be honest with you. I can't even think of my favorite spell like uh
Fifth edition.
from fifth. I can't think of it because there's so many. That's the problem.
There are
Uh,
a lot, but you can definitely come up with a favorite school of magic, which could help you from there. Because there's the reason why we all like the different schools of magic that we align ourselves with.
Probably evocation. I do like evocation. I think it's an interesting school of magic. I also like
Okay.
divination, but I don't want to get. I also like adjuration. Jesus Christ, all of these are good. Adjuration is like my favorite
I mean, they
wizard.
are all beneficial in different ways. That was the point of their different like. That's why they are the different schools of magic. But it's
It,
also why wizard's probably not your favorite class. For
wizard is
somebody
one of my
who
favorite classes for sure. Yeah.
well, what I'm saying though is like when it comes down to how certain classes are worked, a wizard's main focus is a specific school of magic,
Mm.
which I fucking hate, but at the same time, it makes a bit of sense with how they've worked wizards. So those who play wizards choose a school of magic from which they are preferred with, and that's the school they tend to focus. Like a transmutation wizard has a bunch of transmutation spells. Yes, there are other spells in their arsenal, but most of them are going to be transmutation because polymorph and other shit like that.
I
It just
have
makes sense for the class.
Yeah, I have a Gandalf, Dumbledore, whatever. I have that Esh type character in this world that knows every school of magic in some level. He's
Hmm.
incredibly powerful, made that way intentionally, so that the party can see how powerful they can become. He's literally a stepping stone to show them how powerful how weak they are now, but how powerful they can become. He's kind of like a stepping stone, if you will. Kind
Mm,
of a hint, if you will. He does some funny shit throughout the entire campaign, and like I understand that shit. I like making my own spells as well. That's one of my favorite things with D&D is making my own shit.
I mean, I agree. Making my own stuff is definitely one of my favorite things to do. I have. Let me find the homebrewery file really quick because just in fifth edition subclasses alone, let's see here. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 different subclasses that are all my own creation over the
Yeah,
course of the 4 years that I've been playing
yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah. I love that. I don't think I'm ever
Uh,
gonna step into the foot feet. Feet? Really?
Feats are pretty difficult to create your own with, but they do make a bit of sense if you know how to really work them. But again, the more that Dungeons and Dragons make feats, the more one powerful they get, and two, the more pushing the boundaries they do, and it becomes a little more wacky than it should be.
I
Um,
I'm going to make a module for 5e myself. I'm going to make several of them, but I'm kind of scared of doing that. I
you
mean,
don't have to customize and make new feats. Feats are not something that are necessary
oh
for a
no,
new
I'm not going to
module.
make feats. That's not something I care about. I'm going to make a book about monsters. That's something I'm super excited about, and I want to make my own
Mm.
monsters. I do. I want to make like stuff within Celtic religion. I want to make something that is just purely mine, like the Balrog is for Tolkien's world. I want to make something beautiful but terrifying.
Right.
That is literally what the Balrog is. It's one of the most beautiful cinematic creations of all time, but it's the most horrific monster of all time. I mean, I still look at the like I remember I used to have nightmares about that thing when I was a kid. Jesus
Right.
Christ. Lord of the Rings, man. Lord of the Rings. Oh, what can I say? Uh speaking of which, what is your favorite monster? Let's stick to the not just the monster manual. Let's stick to the published D&D works for now. But you can speak of something that you privately have made afterwards. I want to just hear what is your favorite monster in D&D?
I don't have a favorite monster when it comes to fifth edition content because again, I mean, I'll say this, before the OGL situation, even then I still didn't really have a favorite, but a common monster that I like to to use is probably a boulet, just because they're these big armored creatures that burrow at really incredible speeds. It was just an interesting idea, and I like to use them occasionally because my party hates them.
I love.
But I don't
Okay,
have a favorite.
okay,
Genuinely, I don't care for 5th edition monsters, and that's
okay,
why a lot of my monsters I've made myself.
okay. So first of all, one of my favorite fifth edition monsters to do. Well, first of all, I don't do the orcs. First of all, I love the orcs. That's one of my favorite because I have this voice that I get really worked up with, and I go crazy, and I just go, "Ah, destruction, mayhem, death." Yeah, yeah, I just like going crazy, and that's one of my favorite reasons why, as a DM, the orcs are my favorite. By the factor that I can just be crazy and goofy, and I don't have to make a lot of sense, which is one of the things that I love to do. Because the orcs are just so goofy and like they're kind of like a mixture of Tolkien self. They're black skinned, they're not green skinned. Goblins are green skinned in my world, but orcs are black skinned, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
kind of like Tolkien's interpretation of what the orcs are supposed to look like. I know, kind of taking a step back, but I think it's fine, and nobody's gonna complain, and not all.
Just you fucking wait.
I mean, people are going to complain. That's just how it works. Uh, but I'm just stating right now that I think that like a lot of my favorite shit in D&D is like based around that stuff, and the orcs are one of my favorite things in D&D for sure.
So a lot of what you would consider your favorite monsters within D&D would have to be things that remind you more of like other high fantasy pop culture references, such as Lord of the Rings. Yes.
Not necessarily, but it is my favorite to go with right now. Yeah, because I can be
Okay.
super goofy with it. That's pretty much
Gotcha.
it. I like making my own as well. Don't get me wrong. I hear what you're saying, but it's just simplistic, and we don't need to go overly complicated with everything. And like I've already created my own ratkin thing, which is kind of like a reference to Skaven, but the reason why I created them was because of the reason. Well, they're more like mousekin than ratkin. But the point is that yeah, humor me. They look more like
Mm-hmm.
mouse than rat. So essentially, they're kind of like a reference to Skavens from Warhammer, which I know many people are going to like call out me for being like bullshit. But the point that I'm making is that I like making new shit from old stuff, but I like coming up with ideas from old things. Now,
Right.
Tolkien's orcs aren't very goofy, very weird. I'm kind of mixing them with Warhammer orcs and the orcs there because they can be serious orcs, like, and I can be like, I can do whatever I want. That's the crazy thing, just that nobody knows with the orcs. They're so chaotic that nobody knows in my world. It's kind of the
Okay.
point.
Fair enough.
I
As far as my favorite like monster overall, I did create one that
Mhm.
my players ended up fighting once and killing, but her creation overall gave my players pause back when she was created. And it's a monster that was called Bonnie of the Jotengard, and she was a hint at what was to come next. She was a very like devout clerical figure within the Jotengard's like private domain with what they are effectively like where they are in the Arctic Wastes, which is where the party is now, and they met her before they went to the Arctic Wastes in the first place. And her voice is even still used thanks to the ring of mind shielding that she possessed on her when she died. And so there's a whole like section, there's a whole like a side quest that they were in the middle of trying to do before one of the players fucking died. Long story short, a lot of her abilities, like one of her abilities that she's able to use was a cleric's channel divinity to make herself grow a size category larger. And when she did that, the party went, "Oh shit, that's a big fucking problem." and it was just a lot of fun to run her along with another monster that I made called Alar. But I haven't released these publicly, and if I get a chance to write the book, I probably will. But until that, it's got to stay private.
Fair enough. I'm not gonna challenge you on that. I gotta ask you, what is your least? Okay, this a lot of these are worst favorite whatever. I am genuinely curious of what you think is the worst spell in D&D is.
There's only one worse spell in D&D. It's fucking True Strike.
Yeah, I was about
Next.
to say. I was about to
That's that's not a question.
say.
Pass.
Everybody,
Let's move on.
I see invisibility is horrible, but True Strike.
See, invisibility
Ooh.
is horrible if you don't have common sense and you're running the game rules as written. Yeah. But if you aren't running the game rules as written, see, invisibility actually does shit. So move
Ah.
on. The worst spell is True Strike, and we move on.
Ah. All right. Do you know who Brennan Lee Mulligan is?
Yes, I'm aware of Brennan Lee Mulligan.
All right. Can I ask you what you think about Brendan and Matt? Like genuine as DMs. What is your opinion on them?
So I'll say this. Matt Mercer is a great DM for his campaign. He is not a dungeon master in the sense that the rest of us are dungeon masters for our own campaigns. He and a lot of Critical Role are voice actors, and they are telling a very elaborate story that has mostly been created by Matt as the dungeon master, and it's interacted with by all the different players. But Critical Role on itself is an absolutely horrible example of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I say that because it's not even a remotely like relevant iteration of the game. They are putting on a show. They have a lot of like really high production value, and they have the ability to essentially turn it into a comedy that people can watch and listen to. And with everybody being in the voice actor industry, they know how to bounce stuff off one another and still be able to function like an actual D&D game. It's not 5th edition. It's a show. So I'm not going to be talking about Matthew Mercer as a DM otherwise. Brennan Lee Mulligan is a very creative DM, but I'll say this. The Box of Doom thing feels like their own like specific niche to the game that was added because they needed something new unique, but didn't make a lot of sense until it became more commonplace within the game. Like everybody else in the very first couple of episodes where the Box of Doom was first shown, it didn't make a lot of sense, nor was everybody like it was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool." Um it just didn't fit very well. But eventually people caught on. They were like, "Oh yeah, I know what the Box of Doom is now," and now it's a part of their staple. But it felt very forced in the beginning, and I
I
feel
know.
like it was because he wanted something that made his campaign unique, and I can actually really admire that. I don't have anything like that in my campaign. What I use for the mechanics of my game are a specific critical hit system, and when I tell people to make certain skill checks, I tell them to make skill checks based on their stat modifier typically, and then the skill associated, which is different to how most people run 5th edition. Most people tell you to make the skill check, and the value already added is pre-made there on the character sheet. That's the default character sheet. I fucking hate that. I'd rather tell you, like, hey, if you're trying to break out of bonds, that's an intelligence sleight of hand check to break out of the bonds. Or if you're trying to break out of the bonds, that's just a strength check. But trying to undo a knot, that's more of an intelligence-based thing, contest with somebody else's intelligence-based check. Or if you're trying to blend into a crowd, that might be charisma stealth as opposed to dexterity stealth. Does that make sense?
No, no,
Um,
I'm following you. I really,
that's really the only thing that's unique about my campaign, and even then, I wouldn't even really call that really unique because the 5th edition rules state that that's something you can do. Like, I think the rules for like tying a rope on somebody's arms and then subsequently breaking free out of those bonds by untying the knot, they're both intelligence-based checks that are not default intelligence skill checks. Like one of them, I believe, is sleight of hand to break out, and to tie the knot, I'm pretty sure it's a oh god, what is it? It's It might be an intelligence survival check to tie the knot, I think is what it is. So it was intelligence
Wisdom.
survival, which whatever that value is sets the DC for untying those bonds from yourself.
I believe that if I don't remember wrong, survival is wisdom, not
Correct, by
your.
default.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, in I'm pretty sure I you can potentially quote me on this and tell me I'm wrong if you find it later, but the Dungeon Master's Guide, I believe, I forget that's where I read it or not, but has a guide for like optional ways to use skill checks, which is like when somebody's hands are tied together or bound together, it's for the person binding the arms together to make an intelligence survival check. So that'd be a intelligence based check, and if you're proficient with survival, you add your proficiency modifier. That will set the DC for the person to try to break out. So whenever they try to like to untie the rope and break their arms free, that's an intelligence sleight of hand check. The DC is whatever the other guy rolled to tie the fucking knot.
Fair enough.
But that's how there it's dynamic skill checks. It's a more complex way to do it, but it also opens up a lot more freedom. It makes strength-based intimidation checks much more commonplace rather than a DM who's refusing to use it because that's not what it says in the rules. You know?
I I'm a really loose DM when it comes to the rules. I mean, you can ask my players. I myself, like, I understand that. I mean, I'm gonna tell you the truth. Like, okay, so this starts off with Brendan and Matt. I honestly, Brennan got me into D&D. Like, without like joking. Like, I was discussing somebody D&D like a year half a year, I think. I don't remember, but a while before I watched the campaign with Brennan,
Mm-hmm.
and I I wouldn't like. I really kind of watched Brennan, and then I tried to think to myself, okay. So like, but I started my campaign by thinking the genuine question of like, what would Brennan do?
Mm.
Which is a
Yeah, I don't like
horrible,
that.
which is a horrible way to run the campaign. Uh,
Yeah.
Now I think to myself, what would I do? Is what I think to myself now, which is something that I needed to kind of coerce myself into over half a year of playing the game. I needed to actually like think about this because I started off D&D in a really horrible place, where well, not a really well. Yeah, I started with D&D at a really horrible place, and I didn't know where to go. And I was just like, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? How would Brennan solve this problem if he was sitting in my chair? Well, Brennan would do something completely different than what I did anyway. But I kept thinking that to myself, and then I stopped thinking that to myself, and then I started thinking, what would I do in this situation? Which is way healthier, by the
It's
way.
way healthier, but I'll do you one better. I always think, what would the character do?
You know what? That's a fair question.
Fair statement.
I don't even know if there's a worst monster indeed. I don't think there's such a thing. Is there?
Yeah, anything that was made for power gamers, because it screws up the rest of our playtime.
uh yeah, GG, I guess. Uh Jesus
I've got
Christ.
a personal campaign in one of the players that's there. He's a DM for one of our games, which is a Mythic Odysseys of Theros game. And it's kind of hell sometimes. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. It can be fun, but he runs it like you either know you're going to win the encounter or you are struggling through the entire encounter. It's uh, it's tough.
Fair enough.
Um, but otherwise, there is when we're playing like a Star Wars 5e game that we have. His last character he made was this incredibly strong character that ended up doing a shit ton of damage, and he was a fighter. And then when he played Bunkers and Badasses, which by the way is awful, um, he ended up playing a Psycho, which just did shit tons of damage at really early level. He was killing everything, and it just made the game really unfun for the rest of the players who either didn't know what they were doing or we're still trying to find the bearings, or we're just trying to roleplay. It made it really difficult for them. Power gamers are the worst. That's my rant on that.
Do you, general question, do you prefer to play as a player or do you prefer being the DM?
I'll say this. Given what I have for the 2 games that I have played in, with the dungeon masters that I've played with, one of them being my brother who's actually been a pretty good DM, but I know too much of the lore already based on how the campaign is and the fact that it's Star Wars 5e, and I just know way too much of the lore.
Yeah, tell me
I
about
hate
it.
being a player in that campaign only for the fact that I know so much. Um, and I'm a critic. I am everybody's worst critic. I'll say that on one sound. Like I just went to a fucking Polyphia concert and it disappointed me every time they messed up the song. And then they did some new shit, and it was only with that new shit that I was able to actually have fun. Uh, but as far as the other campaign goes, I still don't feel like I enjoy the DMing style of that DM, just personally. And that those are really my only 2 references for being a player, aside from a one shot that was run by one of our players, who plays as Caroline in our D&D game. And that was actually pretty fun. Overall, I think I'd rather be the DM because I have more experience being the DM. It's the role that I'm a little more comfortable with at this moment, and I feel more in control of the story. Where even when I'm not in control of the story, because somebody's done something to, I don't know, light an entire dock on fire for no fucking reason, like it happens, and it wasn't for no reason, but no, it was for no reason. It was for no reason. But I still was able to direct the story in a way that made it fun and still made sense. So yeah, Dungeon Master is probably the role that I'd fit more comfortably into.
Enough. I mean, I haven't played enough as a player, so I can't really comment. But let's put
Mm.
it this way: I'd rather not discuss it because it's a
I will
nightmare.
say I'll say this. When it comes to being a dungeon master, there are always going to be those of us who answered the call and become the forever DMs. It just happens. It's how it has always happened. It's how that's why I'm a dungeon master and have been for 4 fucking years.
I think I
But at the
might.
same time, like I feel like the dungeon master is a position that everybody should try at least once because it's not as bad as it is as people think it is. It's a little intimidating at first, but once you get the hold of it and you just kind of fall into place with all the other players, it's just as easy as being a player.
Especially if you have
The only
story.
difference is you're going to have people trying to trip you up half the time.
Yeah.
And as long as you got answers, you're safe.
I
You're
mean,
fine and it's going to go great.
yeah. I mean, the main thing that people are worried about is storytellers in their game, which is, if you don't know, uh, D&D Shorts made a really interesting video about it. How do I describe it? Um, he described 7 different character types, and one of them is like, one of them is called a storyteller, which will want to know everything about a certain NPC that they meet randomly on the street, because for some reason they want to know that information about Boblin the Goblin, you know.
It
Uh,
happens sometimes.
yeah, I know. I love it when my players do that. I love when my players randomly walk up to an NPC and then ask them, "What is your name? What is your preference? What do you work with? What do you do?" Fuck, that makes me angry sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. It's the most annoying piece of shit thing in the world to deal with.
It's it can be tough, but there is a helpful solution to that, which is to have a name binder. You can
Okay.
have it sectioned off by the different races you're going to have in your games, and you just meet somebody random, and people are like, "Hey, what's this person's name?" You can be like,
No, I typically have like a mind map. Like it's like I'm pulling out like things. So like if halfling, like halfling in my world is like Roman or Italian, like the actual like lang. Okay, so the way that my world is set up is that the languages. Okay, so the human empire, they speak ancient Greek, right? The League of Beastmen. Well, the Aarakocra, the Owlins, and the not kobolds, Kenku all speak Japanese. That's their original language. Uh, which is kind of like a reference to the actual thing. I wish that I spoke Japanese. It would be fun. But okay.
This will still help you. Sorry, I hit the mute button on my console.
Yeah, fair enough.
But just
Yeah,
have the names prepared. That is the solution.
I know. Okay, so one thing. I made a lot of teachers. Anyway, now. Okay, now first of all right. Let's see here. Oh yeah. What is the most? No. How important is role playing to you in D&D, and how do you balance it with combat and exploration?
In the moment where my party is currently stationed and how the story's progressed, with conflict breaking out between multiple different entities and them having to resolve that conflict, um, it can be difficult to have that balance, especially with the direction the storyline goes. My campaign typically ends up having like 3 sessions, 2 to 3 sessions with combat, and then a role play session or two. But a good balance is 50-50, where you have a role play session and then a combat session. Or if you need to have more of one than the other, it depends on the type of group you're going to play with. If you have a bunch of players who are more focused and more attentive when it comes to the combat of things, have an additional combat session mixed into that balance. But if your type players are not built for combat, or if the characters aren't built for combat, or the players would rather roleplay amongst each other, or even the world around you, definitely have 2 to 3 more roleplay sessions than combat sessions.
Mhm.
But it varies from campaign to campaign and from playgroup to playgroup.
I think role playing is very important, but I think that is also important with everything else. I think you're right. I don't think I have anything else to say about everything that you just said. What is your favorite D&D campaign setting and why?
I have only ever played in two. Curse of Strahd, which the ending was kind of ruined for me. And I'm currently playing in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. I can't honestly say that I enjoy one over the other, nor do I care to play in modules. Modules are too predictable sometimes,
Tell me
and
about
I'd just rather not. I'd rather play in somebody's homebrew world. But at the same time, that also falls in the issue of that homebrew world not following the same rules that my own world would fall into. And so I have to struggle with what's different from that compared to mine. For example, my world would allow for like different races to come from different places. It's not as segregated in some places, and it makes more sense for things to intermingle with each other. Plus, it matters where different subclasses come from. It just matters. Um, but most worlds don't do that. Most worlds don't give a in-depth world description as to why that subclass is what your subclass is. Arya is one of the player characters we have. Her subclass is Circle of the Moon. It's because she is a um Aasimar from a hidden druidic group cult that is hidden amongst uh the woodland domain of Aryawood, and it's a hidden kind of village. But she's a Circle of the Moon, and she's said to be one of the most powerful druids to come to her village in a very long time. Circle of the Moon, as you should know, is probably the most powerful druid subclass. It just is. But that's why she is kind of embarking on that journey. She's going through her life trying to explore different aspects of different like facets of life. She didn't start using her elemental wild shape until she got to like an underground kind of area where she adapted to the elements, creating a earthly entity. The more she interacted with Caroline, the more likely she was to adapt a fire entity with her wild shape. And I started seeing more of that. Once she got into the colder environments of things, when she used her elemental wild shape, she got to experience the high winds and the cold temperatures, and she kind of chooses more often the air elemental and has yet to choose the water. But that's also something that, as we progress, she may choose later on, now having that experience. But it's as she's out of her element enduring these challenges and losses of friendships in life. That's how she's adapting into becoming the archdruid with all the experience and knowledge to save her and help her village that she's attempting to possess. That's why she's doing what she's doing. So yeah, I hate modules.
If there's any consolation, I don't like him either. I prefer to just sit down and think to myself, how do I make a world? But that's okay. So what is the most challenging? Okay, so this is going to be really funny, but I wonder what you have to say to this. What is the most challenging encounter or puzzle you have ever faced or put your players through?
The most challenging encounter or puzzle that I have ever faced, I really can't set up. I can't really describe, except during Curse of Strahd, we had a paladin that was fuck it, I think it was like Oath of the Crown or Oath of Conquest or something like that, and he was like, "I only don't follow the tenet of, don't stealing because I steal." Except he was also a coward. He also lied. He also cheated. He did not fit that subclass whatsoever and ran from literally every encounter.
He's
Our
an
fucking
Oathbreaker.
paladin. So literally, the hardest challenge I overcame, combat with that fucking paladin. Otherwise, the most difficult challenge or puzzle that I put my players through was a combat encounter with the vault monster within the vault of the Prison of Time, and they had a huge party for this. I had a couple different people come into the group. Like we had, I think for that specific session, we had 12 players, and I
Oh,
was the only DM. It was a big combat session.
yeah.
Um, I had one player go up and scout everything and eventually just not come back. Everybody else got to rest, and when they went up to figure out what happened, she was completely paralyzed in what looked like a stasis bubble, where she was just stuck in place wherever she was. And there was this weird guardian that was standing there, arms crossed with a giant gem in its face. This guardian was known as Locke. They learned why. At the top of initiative, Locke would change the color of its gem to a different color. Unless it was yellow and it wanted to stay yellow, it could. That was the only one it could stay on. If it hit you with certain beams, because there were three different types of beams, one of them was just a destructive beam that dealt a lot of damage. Another one would inflict some kind of disadvantage on you, and the last one was literally just there to paralyze you. And it would paralyze you so long as Locke's color was that color. It was called the Vault of the Prison of Time for a fucking reason.
Fair enough.
They
I mean,
did eventually defeat it, but I literally had like 9 of the 12 players paralyzed before they got to defeat it.
I
It
mean,
was a very tough challenge for them, but they did it. It was almost a party wipe, but they did it.
I have two that are. One of them is extremely funny. The other one, and it will probably both of them are actually extremely funny. Well, I thought to myself recently. I think I sent you the details, but I almost TPK'd my party using zombies, but made them run like they ran. Essentially they ran at max speed, and they instead of like walking at 25th per turn, they were running zombies, and they were controlled by somebody, and essentially the creature that controlled them was really powerful. So what he did is that he flanked the party, and that nearly caused a TPK because the party couldn't fucking fathom that zombies could flank. That's the first thing. And not only that, but the ogres were really powerful. But like afterwards they demanded a level up, which is really funny. Now, secondly, um I there was a bunch of puzzles in a tomb, which they were a dungeon, more correctly named, I suppose, or a D&D style, that you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Essentially they were puzzling through, they figured out what two of the puzzles were, but the final puzzle where you cannot enter this room, what am I, they spent a half an hour trying to figure this out. And they were just like, what the fuck is the answer to this fucking puzzle? I don't get it. What the fuck? And then one of the guys just said mushroom. And I just like, you guys see the door comes open and everybody screamed at me. Which is uh Satisfaction. All I can say is satisfaction. Uh, like just a simple riddle can fuck you. It
Hmm.
is so fun to watch the players just go, "What the fuck is the answer? What the fuck is the fucking?" And then like one of them said it like funnily. It can't be. There's no way. Mushroom. And just like the door opens and everybody shouts like, "What the fuck, dude? You got."
Right.
Sorry, I know I'm hanging on the thing. It's just really funny and I really love it. Ha,
May I ask, how many more questions would you have for me?
I don't have that many, and if you want to, we can even call it off right now if you have to go.
Well, if you have a couple more, I'm free to answer them. I was just curious to see how much longer this was gonna
It's
go
just
on
gonna.
for.
I only had three more, really,
Okay.
in reality, but yeah. Uh, okay, so how do you? Maybe not. Hold on.
Do 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 do. Oh wait, sorry, that might be copyright.
Have you ever played a character that is vastly different from your own personality in real life? What was it like?
Yes. I absolutely have. The only character I've ever played that was very similar to or identical to my personality would be Elda Soraya. And he's one of the DMPC. He's a DMPC or an NPC now in the main campaign that I run. But as far as like I've run a barbarian pathfinder that was completely different from who I am today. But was just I was a shit person as a kid when I played it, and it was just awful. And then I am currently playing a kind of a I really don't want to give up too much detail because I don't know who else is going to see this. But I also may not be playing the character for much longer anyways, due to it being the Star Wars campaign. I'm currently playing a rogue, which I love, but it's a character I meant to play up until like really high level, but decided against it. I've decided I'm gonna probably pick a different character altogether. But um, something that fuck it, I'll just say it. It's fine if they hear it. It's not gonna like I'm gonna play the character for much longer anyways. But the character itself is actively working against the party, like explicitly working against the party and their intentions. Um, he's a agent for not the Galactic Empire. He's an agent for the Sith Empire. And he's known as Cipher 13, I believe.
All right, that
But
is fair enough.
actively, like he's everything he's done has been like he's left a trail for Cipher 13 to follow them. He's uh he's made it so that resources that are pretty wealthy and expensive have been given to his organization for some money on the other side of things. So while he's a rogue, he's got some really shady business deals that he deals with, the party just chalks it up to him being the party rogue, and it's been really easy. His entire goal so far has been to recover the memory identity of the memory core of a lost HK unit, which is another player. But to do that, it would require that player dying. Well, that player doesn't want to play that character anymore, so this is probably going to happen a lot sooner than we initially thought. But the only reason that hasn't happened immediately is because this entity, this HK unit, is friends with other people, and the Galactic Empire assaulted us, and we all escaped together. Two of the people that we were escaping with are force sensitive, and my character has to report that. And so now my party is hunted by my organization, but I'm the undercover agent.
That is GG. I like that. That's brilliant. All right, so I gotta ask you a question. What is the most creative solutions your party or you have ever come up with?
My party was fighting one of the acolytes of Haldor, which is Haldor is a very like heavily religious character, and he's a war cleric of Thor.
Oh, of
He
course.
has a number of acolytes that are all very much on the aspect of like following what he says to the letter or without question. And this was a zealot barbarian. I gave him enough levels of the zealot barbarian so that he would, after dying, still fight until stopped his rage somehow. Well, right when he was at really low HP, and I mean like he was in double digit HP, nearing single digit HP. One of my party members was like, I have an idea. Polymorph. They never got to experience the undying aspect of this acolyte. They just polymorphed him, put him in a jar, and went skeet shooting. That's literally what they did. Somebody threw it up in the air, and 5 or 6 different players fired shit at it until it died. And I was like, I planned for that to be a little more of a difficult encounter, and you stumped me before I got the chance to fuck with you. All right, well done. Fuck it. Some things just don't go the way you plan, and you gotta roll with the punches. Or there's the other time that my players like to refer to as, quote, the Pearl Harbor incident. Yeah, I see you laughing over there, fucker. Um, One of the party members was tasked with freeing their criminal contact. The other 2 party members of this campaign at the time were helping him sneak in. One of them snuck in with him. The other, the red skin tiefling, fire element, was meant to stand out as guard. Well, he's wearing one of the acolytes' armors. None of the acolytes are a fucking tiefling, so that's already a red flag to the Empire. And before getting caught, he's like, you know what? Fuck it, fire. He runs onto the dock, burns the dock behind him so nobody can follow him, then sends his familiar to burn the dock ahead of him for no fucking reason. He literally lit both ends of a dock on fire. And when I told him, you realize you've just trapped yourself on a dock, now engulfed in flames on both sides, and you can't get to the ship. And he goes, I'm resistant to fire. And I go, yeah, I guess, but like, why would you walk in fire anyways? He walks through the fire to get onto the ship, which is now being caught on fire because he didn't kick down the fucking wooden plank leading to the wooden ship. He started a ship fire and a dock fire that just began to spread like wildfire. They charmed half of the entire crew, killed the rest that were on that ship, freed their criminal contact, and before everybody could get off, instead of taking them with them, they were like, yeah, we're gonna leave now. And they were like, that's a great idea. How do we leave? And then the guy charming them was like, that's the best part. You don't. And left. The ship was scuttled via cannon fire because it was completely engulfed in flames and nobody from the Empire could get to it to fucking stop it. So it was ordered that the ship would just be scuttled. It blew up. They escaped. They killed an entire crew and barely made it onto the shore with enough oxygen in the bag of holding for everybody to escape. It was a shit show, and they still very pleasantly refer to it as the Pearl Harbor incident.
I
It's
remember.
even more terrifying because I've introduced aerial garrisons into my campaign, flying forts that are meant to be, to transport soldiers of one of the empires that's in the Arctic wastes. And one of them mentioned 9/11, and I'm just ready for it. I'm waiting for something to fucking happen. Like, we know what's coming. As offensive as it is, they fucking said it. One of us in the campaign is working towards a security clearance through a government job, and the one of us with the darkest skin tone was the one that said 9/11. He's the one that made the fucking joke. My friend is never getting that security clearance. It's just not gonna fucking happen.
Of course, yes.
Trader knows what he did. I'm calling him out. He knows what the fuck he did.
Hey, if there's anybody recording this fucking, I mean, this is being recorded online. I'm crying. Jesus Christ. If anybody, please make sure he doesn't get the security clearance, please. Okay, all
No, no,
right.
no. He's not the one. The one that made the joke isn't the one looking for the security clearance. It's a different player. But that player has to tell the government who all outside of the country they're in contact with. One of them being a Canadian citizen, not a US citizen, making 9/11 jokes. It's just very unlikely for this person, this player, to get the security job. Is all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I believe you. All right. First of all, I'm gonna stop crying. Jesus Christ. Ah, that is beautiful. That is that is actually fantastic. I love that shit.
He knows what he did.
Why am I crying? Why am I crying? Jesus Christ! It's so good. It's so good. Okay. All right. Have you? All right. Hold on. I need to read what this question is. Have you ever had a character die in a campaign? How did the party or you handle it?
I have never played a character that died in the campaign. I all of my characters that I've played in while I've been in control of them have all survived. And I say that in the sense like my Pathfinder character got killed off screen when I left the campaign. So I don't really count that one. Um, but otherwise I've never as a player I have yet to have a character die.
What about your party?
However, I have had two now player characters die with me being the DM. One
Oh,
of them was a character called Kadrith, who was killed by another player character called Caroline,
of
and
course.
it all has to do with the series of events that refers to Asher's spark and her becoming the champion of Asher. He killed somebody who possessed a spark, and Asher was like, "I want one of you two to be the champion, and whoever survives wins." And that's what happened. It was a lot more in depth and a lot more sudden than that because it was not like, "Oh, epic combat, only one survives." No, it was a coup de grace by the rogue, and yeah, it was a very like heartbreaking moment in the campaign. The other one that happened actually happened just before. The video is still on on the YouTube channel. It starts with old and then is listed as episode 39. um, but it was when Spot died. Before I started the campaign up again. It was right around the time the OGL bullshit was happening, and I had these creatures that they were fighting. That was they all had 4 attacks each, and there were 6 of them. But what ended up happening was he got downed by the first hit, a natural 20 on the second hit, which was 2 death saving throws failed, and then he fell 120 feet. He just fucking died. The only reason he wasn't allowed to be revived is because sessions ago he pulled Void out of the deck of many things. So one of his 3 soul fragments got teleported away. Now all those soul fragments are together, locked away. He can't be revived. So if you guys are wondering why Tobias is just kind of hanging around the campaign for a while, not doing anything, not saying anything, it's because his character is currently dead in a bag of holding. That's not a joke.
I mean, a character. Okay, so recently in the D&D campaign, in the D&D session, a character of mine died. Um, Oricus, his name was the Dragon Slayer. A really cool character, really cool idea. He used to slay dragons, hence the name. Thousands of years ago, but he's like super weak to what he was. And then I I made this thing for Nexo to do where I
Mm-hmm.
was just like, okay, so Nexo said to me he wanted me to develop a massive dragon curse that was settled to his character, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I did that, and I made this a curse that couldn't even be taken away with wish, right? It had to be
Okay.
done by ancient magic. We're talking 10th level or higher. Now, this magic is like so ancient, and he wanted this specifically. Actually, I think he wanted to die. Don't ask me. I don't know. He's fucking lunatic. And then he ended up in the middle of the battle after downing 2 players. I let him get control of himself for 6 seconds, and he ended up tearing out his heart and crushing it.
Mm,
He died, and I was just like, "The fuck have I done?" I gave him control so that he could fucking fall prone, not die. I wasn't expecting him to rip out his heart.
mhm. I mean, it happens. Players do weird shit all the time.
He's an asshole for doing that because his entire character arc now is ruined.
Right?
So much planned. You know what I mean? I had so much planned. He's such a cuck. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. It's been 1 hour and 40 minutes. I think that's a good time to shout it. Um, Again, if you guys are interested in Rexel's content, please go down into the description down below and actually do go on her channel. She does a lot of cool shit, and if you are not into that,
Well,
um,
I wouldn't say I do a lot of cool shit yet, but give me some time. I got some things in the work.
yeah,
You can check out my actual channel, just known as Rexel. You'll see it has a cat face on it with some colors in the background.
yeah,
But otherwise, if you want to check out the Wildcast, you can always find us there. We live stream every Friday, or at least try to, but with scheduling, it can be a little difficult.
yeah,
Beyond that, I mean, thanks for having me.
yeah, for sure. They're down in the description, so if anybody is interested in like looking them up, description. Remember
Oh,
description.
there was one
Uh,
more thing too. I am in the middle of making my own system that's 5e adjacent. It's compatible with most of the 5e content that's released already and will be released in the future. But it'll be a separate system. So if you're interested, I've planned to post updates on my YouTube channel or the Wildcast YouTube channel. Haven't decided yet, but when I post an update, if you subscribe, you'll be one of the first people to know.
all right. Everybody that is interested in this, please give an applause for. Well, not an applause. What am I doing? And everybody, thank you guys so much for joining us for today. My name is Becken, and I'm out. Good luck.